in 8thBeryl family. You're welcome to another episode of our 8thBeryl baking class. Today, we're not going to be baking, we're not just going to be teaching, we're also going to be doing an experiment together. Today actually holds out a whole lot of surprises. So, we're going to be talking about flour today. Remember that in previous sessions, we discussed that flour is the foundation of baking. Without flour, your bread does not exist. Without flour, your cake does not exist because it is the foundation upon which your bread or your cake is built upon. So let's get right into it. But before we start, I want to show you something I want to do. Just take note of these two containers I have here. One is red and one is orange. Inside them are two different types of flour. I have white bread flour and I have whole wheat flour. Both of them weigh 50 grams each. And this is 35 grams of water. Remember, the 70% rule of our balanced dough. For a balanced dough, you need to add 70% of the total weight of flour. So these are 50 grams of flour each in each individual bowl, different types of flour. And I'm just going to simply pour this water into this flour. I'll come back to it later. So I'll give it a good mix and let it rest. I want to show you something as we proceed in class. But for now, let me just mix this up before we start talking about flour. All right, this is good enough. So let me go to the whole wheat flour and give it its own mix. Can you see what I'm doing here? You can see how this one is even breaking up self already. All right, something interesting is about to unfold. Knowledge is power, right? Let me pick these ones. I don't know where they were going to, but they're going back into my bowl because I don't want to miss any part of this session. So this is our whole wheat flour. 50 grams of wheat flour mixed with 35 grams of water. 50 grams of bread flour mixed with 35 grams of water. While it rests, let's continue talking. So flour is the foundation upon which all forms of baking is built, right? Flour determines what quantity of water you put into your dough. The flour type also determines how well or how weakly your gluten structure will be formed. Remember, we talked about gluten. Gluten we discussed extensively yesterday. So if you are new here, this is your first time, please do well to watch the video we uploaded yesterday. We always come around live every evening by 8 p.m. So you can always learn a lot of things from our channel. So yesterday we talked about gluten in detail. But if this is your first time, I'll just say simply that gluten refers to protein. Protein in wheat flour. Gluten is not a death sentence. Gluten is not a bad thing. Gluten is just a protein present in wheat flour. And gluten is formed especially when wheat flour comes in contact with water. So the strength of gluten in the flour depends on a lot of things. It depends on the flour type. There are broadly three types of flour. We have bread flour. Bread flour contains high protein, and that's what makes it have a stronger gluten. It's when I started making bread initially, I didn't know that there was something called bread flour. I would just go and say, give me flour, and they will give me flour. I will follow recipe. Maybe today I buy one type of flour. I know that it's not bread flour. I'll buy the flour, make the bread. I will see the bread coming out okay, not too bad. And I'll go and buy another flour. And I'll be like, why is this bread better than this bread? I'm like, it's that company. That company is bad. Their flour is bad. I didn't know that it wasn't the company. It was the kind of flour I was buying. I was not buying bread flour because bread flour does a lot of different things to your bread. When it comes to holding the bread together, forming the gluten structure, just give it up to bread flour. It gives you 100% better bread, no cap, because it contains higher protein and therefore a stronger gluten structure. When it comes to absorbing moisture, how does bread flour behave? Bread flour absorbs way more moisture than other kinds of flour. Absorbs more, greater, absorbs greater moisture than other types of flour. Now, it is the best for bread making. What about all-purpose flour? Now, when it comes to all-purpose flour does not contain as much, so not as much protein, or let's just say moderate so that we don't make things complex. So we'll just say moderate, yeah, high, moderate protein. But does it mean that you cannot use all-purpose flour to make bread? No, you can use all-purpose flour to make bread. But when it comes to the texture, when it comes to the rice, you cannot compare the kind of rice you will get from an all-purpose flour with the rice you will get from what? A bread flour. Now, so it does not have as much gluten strength. So we'll still say moderate gluten strength, right? Moderate gluten. Because gluten is protein. The quantity of protein in the flour determines the kind of gluten strength you're going to have in the dough. And then it is just a moderately absorbent flour. If you're talking about balanced dough, when you're working with a bread that requires 80% hydration and you're using a bread flour, you'll be using a 70% hydration when you're working with a regular all-purpose flour, right? So it's not as absorbent. It does not absorb as much moisture, as less absorption as much as the bread flour does. Now, so your bread is usually just okay. It's just not bad. Do you understand? Now, what about cake flour? Cake flour is more airy. It's meant to give you a more fluffy result because it's meant for cake. It's not meant for bread. So if you make bread with cake flour, you're not going to get the same strong dense structure as you would like your bread to have because it has lower protein. It is specially designed to contain low protein in it. Please make sure that you don't do basbos and say flour is flour. Flour is not flour. Good. So it has low gluten. Most of the time your bread turns out like cake because you're using cake flour, and it also has low absorption. In fact, much lower than the all-purpose flour. So I've been able to establish that when you want to buy flour, please make sure that if you are making bread, you are buying bread flour for making bread. You can still use all-purpose flour, but if you want to get better bread, make sure that you're buying bread flour for making bread, right? So just think about it. If you want to build a house, you need what kind of building materials? You need strong building materials if you want your house to last. The stronger your building materials, the stronger your house turns out. So if you want to bake bread, you need a stronger flour that can hold your bread in place. Because if you don't use a strong flour, your bread is not going to stand strong. It's not going to withstand all the things that are happening in the bread that we have been discussing. The proofing, the kneading, it's not going to hold in place. So make sure that you're always checking that the flour type you're using actually matches with what you're making, what you're using it for. If you're making cake, use cake flour. If you're making bread, make sure you're using bread flour as much as possible. So now, when you have a recipe, I told you it happened to me before, make sure that you are using the recipe for the flour is mentioned in the recipe. Whoever is teaching you, is showing you a recipe, the person should clearly explain the kind of flour they are using for that recipe. If you don't understand that, please ask questions so that you don't just go and copy a recipe blindly and you get different results and you start thinking that somebody is following from somewhere, nobody is following from anywhere, it is you that you not ask the right questions, because different flour behave differently, they have different absorption ratios, and they actually give a different type of dough result. There's always a difference in that. 70% hydration for dough is not the same hydration with 70% of water for another dough. You see, I have done something here. I use 70% hydration for both doughs. This is bread flour. This is whole grain flour. Now, before we even go further, can you see what is happening to this dough? Can you see how it has come together? 70% hydration is already giving me a sticky dough. Can you see this? The same quantity of water. The dough has come together already. Now, let's also look at what's happening to the wheat. This is 70% hydration. It's scattering. It's crumbling. It's not holding. The same quantity of water. I'm going to explain more about this in detail. We are going to understand why this wheat is crumbling. Whole wheat flour is crumbling. And why this one has held together already. What is actually the difference between these two flour types? And when you're baking, you should take note of that. You see, I didn't understand this at some point early on in my baking journey, because I actually learned baking the hard way. So I wanted to do everything organically. Right from time, my mindset was set on doing bread naturally. So I would process the grains, buy the grains, process them, and try to make bread from them. That was hardcore, but it built 8thBeryl to what it is today. Now, that process humbled me, because I would see a good recipe, bake it with regular bread flour, come out nicely. Now, my own flour that I have formulated with so much love and so much intention was not giving me the same result. And it's not the same bread, it's not the same water, it's not the same. Why is it different? I'm just changing the flour. I didn't understand that that flour that was different was everything. The fact that I was changing that flour meant that I changed the whole thing. I had to go back to the drawing board and realize that the bread was not turning out the way I wanted it to turn, because my flour was different. If your flour is dry when you are mixing it with water, you have a flour problem, especially when you're following the recipe. Bread is weak after you're baking it. It means that the flour you're using has low protein. Do you understand? And if your bread is dry, it means that, like this, crumbly and dry, it means that you have a highly absorbent flour. Now, let us now go over to, we've talked about different types of flour as regards baking, right? Now, let us understand different types of bread flour, or flour that could be used for making bread. When it comes to making bread, a general rule of thumb is use flour that has higher protein. And when we're talking about bread that has higher protein, we just broadly categorize them into three. We have the flour that is refined, we have whole grain flours, and we have bread flour. We've already established bread flour early on in the class. Now, what is refined flour? When it comes to baking, again, mostly what is used to make bread is wheat flour. So refined flour is just flour that has been stripped. I wanted to use another funky word, but I'm not really getting the word. But just flour that has been laid bare, that is naked. Flour that has all the fine cloths that God put inside on top of the grain when he was making the grain. They removed it so the flour will look fine in the eye. It's a naked flour. The bran has been removed. And that bran is actually the fiber in the flour. And the flour, the germ has also been removed. So you see those things and the endosperm. And so all those things, all the parts of wheat grain that has been removed to make the wheat grain softer, to make it easy for you to work with, to give you that light and fluffy agege kind of bread. Exactly. That was the reason why all the processing has taken place in the flour. It's usually a softer kind of flour. It's easier to work with, and interestingly, it absorbs moisture better because it doesn't need too much. If you just put water like a balanced dough, it gives you the result you want, right? So it's easy to handle. Now, the rule of thumb with a regular refined flour is 60 to 70% hydration. You don't need to do too much. It's just a very, very contented kind of flour, like this one. Just contented, right? But this is even bread flour, but it is just a contented flour, right? So refined flour is not so difficult to work with. Now, what about whole grain flour? I like to call whole grain flour a thirsty flour. The quantity of water you would use with a bread flour, it's not the same quantity of water you would use for a whole grain flour. First of all, it drinks up the water completely. That is why you see it cracking and breaking as it cracking. That's why you see it breaking up. The water, 70% hydration is not enough for a whole grain flour. You have to scale it up a bit. Now let's see what happens when I increase the water by 10 grams. Hold on. So I have my cup here. I'm just going to add 10 grams of water to this dough. It was 70 grams before, so 70% before, that was 35 grams. Now I'm going to make it 45 grams, right? Now let's leave it a little time to rest and see whether there's any change in the dough. One of the reasons why I struggled, oh God, when I was making bread initially with my whole grain that I processed myself with so much pride in my heart, was that I didn't understand that the bran and the germ, all those parts that God had put inside this flour or inside the whole grain, were cutting the gluten mesh. They were cutting the gluten network. You see that beautiful gluten structure we achieved yesterday? The bran and the germ will be slicing and tearing it up. So it will not form. You will mix from today to tomorrow. As far as the whole grain flour, it will not form. That is why special processing has to be done to it. Not refining and bleaching it. No, but you have to do something to the flour for it to be able to reach that gluten network. If you want the secret, just chat me up. I'm going to share with you. But then don't worry, just don't mind my bluff. I'm just bluffing. That is the idea. Now, one thing that I also skipped early on was I didn't understand that whole grain flour needs more time to rest. Remember I said it's thirsty. When you drink water and drink water and drink water, what do? You catch a breath. That's exactly what whole grain flour needs. So now that I have mixed it with water, it has rested. See what's happening to it. Has come together. As if it's not the one that was giving you difficulty before. See? We added 45 grams of water to 50 grams of flour to get this consistency. Now, where bakers sometimes get it wrong is that you see this is thick. It's actually sticky, right? Now they'll say, this one is too sticky now. Let me add more flour. Don't do that. Knead it with patience. The flour is going to absorb all of the water in due time, especially if you leave it enough time to rest. So the secret behind working with whole grain flour is essentially giving it time to rest, understanding that it needs an average of 10% more water. It's usually 15% more water, but a general rule of thumb is that you're going to add at least 10% more water. So when the recipe calls for 70 grams or 70% hydration for a typical bread flour, please scale it up to 80% hydration when you're working with whole wheat or whole grain flour. Should I say that again? When a typical bread recipe calls for 70% hydration, 70% hydration for a refined flour, bread flour, make sure you scale it up to 80% hydration for whole wheat flour so you can optimize getting better results. You do not want to miss on that. All right, now, so just like in summary, what have we discussed? We've discussed that white flour or refined flour, because it has been stripped of the bran and the germ, and it is lighter. It just needs the normal water. But bread flour needs a little more hydration because it's a stronger flour. But when you're talking about whole grain flour, it needs much more hydration. It is a thirsty flour. Mistakes that bakers make a lot of the time is using the same recipe with different flours. Always alter your recipe a little whenever it has to do with hydration if you're changing your flour. Second, don't judge your dough too early. Because the dough was dry and crumbly, that means the dough has a problem? No. Just listen to your dough. It's actually telling you something. Sometimes too, give it time to rest, especially when you're working with whole wheat flour, whole grain flour basically. Make sure you give it enough time to rest. And do not be tempted because the dough turned out sticky. You be like, let me come and be adding water. Oh, this thing is too sticky. Me, I cannot need it. Not at all. There are 4 basic rules that you need to follow when you're baking bread with flour. Rule 1, different flour requires different quantity of water. Rule number 2, start low and add water gradually. Start low and add water gradually. Rule number 3, let your dough rest before you start to adjust your water. You remember we added 70% of water to all the ingredients. Okay, good. So let me really show you what this looks like. You see this? Because the dough has rested, it's forming into a beautiful looking dough. It has autolyzed. We talk about autolyzed a lot in our class sessions. The flour has absorbed a lot of the moisture. It's already even beginning to stretch. If we had judged this dough now, we'll say, me, I cannot do bread with this wheat flour. It's not true. You can make beautiful bread with this wheat flour. You just need to understand how to manage your water. And you also see this guy here looking good. It had already even obeyed safe because this is bread flour, right? And it is refined. So it actually is easier to work with. It's pliable. Does not give any issue, any challenge when it's designed for this job. Exactly. Now, number 3, okay, I said you should let your dough rest before you adjust anything. And number 4, sorry about that. Sorry about that, excuse me. Number 4, make sure that you watch your dough and not your recipe. I'll take that again. You might be following a perfectly good recipe and your dough is not responding to that recipe. Don't just trash the dough completely. Make sure that you watch your dough, listen to your dough. What is your dough? The recipe say 200 grams, but after adding 200 grams of water, my bread is still looking strong. Increase the water a little because your dough is talking to you at this point. Don't be too hard and fast. Nothing is really cast on stone when you're making bread, right? So have that in mind. Know that you're in control. You control your water, you control your flour, and you control your bread ultimately. So your flour decides how much water your dough needs, and water decides how your bread turns out. I'll take that again. The flour decides how much water your dough needs. Water decides how your bread turns out. So make sure that you're always watching your hydration. Always watch your hydration so that you do not go wrong with that. Thank you very much. Yeah, I needed this. Thank you. Always make sure you're checking your hydration. Always make sure you're checking water. So I'd like to know in the comment section, has anybody ever had challenges with bread and water before? Have you ever had issue trying to replicate a recipe and just had a serious boost experience? You don't know English. Okay. Oh, oh, sorry about that. I don't know how to speak your language. I hope it can be transcribed into your language because I only speak English for now. Maybe I'll learn your language if you're willing to teach me. Yeah, so thank you for joining into our class today, and I'm sure you have learned a thing or two about flour. Make sure to keep your questions, make sure to keep engaging with us, and make sure to watch other videos if you haven't watched, and make sure to make it a date with us every evening by 8 p.m. because we always have something special and something very, very educative to give to you. All right. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do well to subscribe. Ryder Edson says, thank you for teaching me. Thank you for allowing me to teach you. And thank you for joining us in class today. Anna Louie says, hi. Hello, Anna Louie. You're welcome to our class. I'm glad to have you here joining us today on this session. So, okay. So, thank you so much, Anna Louie. Thank you so much, Ryder Edson. And thank you, um, Mina Shiktara. I'm thinking this is Indian. I don't know how to speak Indian. Lila Hoslo says, hello, how you doing? You're welcome to our live session. Although we are about to round up, you can download the full video if you have come late so that you can learn a lot. We have discussed extensively about flour today. If you're a baker, I'm sure you're going to find this very, very helpful, especially if you bake bread. So this is good. Thank you so much for engaging with us, and thank you so much for being part of this class. Make sure you click the subscribe button. Subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss out on any important information and any video that we are making on this channel. I'm so happy to be here today, and I'm so happy to have you join our session today. I'm not cooking. I just did a session that Rose loves. I'm not cooking. I just did a session on flour. We're able to explain flour type, and this is wheat flour, and this is bread flour. So we're able to establish how both of them respond to water and why they respond differently to water. So this is what you have to understand when you're baking bread. Different flour respond differently to water, and you should not copy a recipe with a different flour for copying sake. If you know that you want to copy a recipe, make sure you copy it to the end and understand the flour that was used. Because if you are copying a recipe that used refined flour and you want to use it to make whole wheat flour, you're going to run into trouble. Or I'm sorry, I'm whole wheat bread. You're going to run into trouble because whole wheat bread actually has a different level of water absorption, the different levels of handling water when you're working with whole wheat bread. So that's what we actually established in our class today. Thank you. That is cool. Really, really cool. So you can watch a recap of the video much later. Yes, please make sure you subscribe to our channel because every evening by 8 p.m., we're dishing out something nice. On some days, we actually bake. On other days, we teach. And then we have Q&A sessions. If you have any questions, shoot, show them all on me. I'll be ready and willing to answer all your questions. I'm looking forward to engaging with you even beyond this YouTube space because we have other social media handles where we also show and discuss with our audience. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for subscribing. I'm so happy to see that. Thank you so much, Lila Rose Loves. So at this point, I'm ready to take any questions. Whoever has questions, please do well to ask me your questions. All right. So in the absence of any question, I'm going to call it an evening. Thank you so much for joining us and doing this with us today. I did not take your time for granted, taking out the time from your busy schedules to spend and listen to me talk about bread, talk about baking. It's such an honor, and I'm so grateful to have you here. So I always promise to deliver quality and value so that it will be time well spent with 8thBeryl. It's always time well spent with 8thBeryl, as a matter of fact. Yeah, like your dress. Oh my goodness, thank you. Oh, I'm blushing. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, Lila Rose Loves. You actually seem like a very sweet person, actually. So are you in Nigeria or what country are you from? I'm in Nigeria. Yeah, I'm waiting for a response. I want to know, where are you watching us from? Lila Rose Loves. Oh, you can't tell. No problem. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Wherever you're watching us from, it's good. I'm glad to have you on this channel, and I hope to see you tomorrow by 8 p.m. I hope you make it a date with us at 8 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you once again for doing this with us. My name remains Mikaya, and this is 8thBeryl Organic. Do have a lovely night rest, and see you tomorrow. Bye.